So with that, I think the best thing I can do is say, I'll now answer any of your questions on any aspect of this or any other aspect of British politics. Yes, sir.
Thank you, and thanks for a very enlightening talk. I must say, in many ways, much more nuanced than much what we hear from the Brexit side of the argument. I think there are a couple of unescapable facts. We were both around in '72 to witness the accession of the UK to the then common market. I come across the Irish Sea, as it happens. And I think there are a number of things that have changed in the world since that time. And therefore the view that you can in some way return today's prior to EU accession is not tenable. We didn't in those days have a Commonwealth which was increasingly looking towards regional areas rather than towards Britain as a mother country. We didn't in those days have an isolationist government in America. We had in those days an Anglo-Irish free trade agreement, which is dead in the water, to be honest with you, because it's not possible to resuscitate that in post-Brexit times. So to go back to that time is like saying let's go back to the growth and go back to hanging. We have to live in the real world as it is now and accept the costs of Brexit, not only economically but also the costs of, for example, relationships with other neighbouring countries being significantly soured over the next negotiation period, and possibly irreparably so. And in terms of the benefits, which I think you would agree probably aren't primarily economic benefits, but the benefits of Brexit stated to be migration, I would question very much that will in any way be to this country's advantage. I think most people here would regard migration as a good rather than a harm. But it won't actually significantly alter at a time when there will be an open border between the EU and the UK in the north of Ireland, and that isn't going to change in reality. So I put it to you that perhaps many of the benefits that are being put forward in favour of Brexit are illusory.
Well, you've phrased your questions in a very nice and sensitive manner, and I thank you for that, and I will try to reply in kind. But I think we are going down a dangerous route if we spend our time arguing about the referendum. The referendum has happened, whether you like it or not. I can only tell you this, that I was Foreign Secretary for quite a long period in the immediate aftermath. There was 2 years gap, but I was there from 77 to 79. And the antis, whether it was Tony Benn, who was in the cabinet with me, whether it was Peter Shaw, a different type of person who had wanted to come out of the European Union, and Michael Foot, even, they accepted the result and they worked with a Foreign Secretary who was totally in favour of doing it. We managed to reach a lot of measures of agreement. What I think has been wrong in the manner is the present European Union referendum is it was challenged almost from day one as being invalid. And I think that is a great mistake. And quite a number of people make no reference to referendum when they argue for some other alternative. Now, I would actually refute most of your arguments. I came reluctantly to this position because I believe that Britain was positioning itself whereby it would have no alternative other than to join the single currency if we stayed and if the referendum had been yes. We wouldn't have had an obligation to do. The Maastricht Treaty opt-out would still have held. But time and time again, people have come out to say, France and Germany are making all the decisions, and unless we join, we will be consistently pushed to one side. And I think there would have been truth in that argument. I also have been pretty impressed by the adaptability of the new enterprising industries and technologies that are developing in this country, and I think they feel quite frequently constrained by EU membership. It's a thundering bureaucracy. I don't want to spend my whole time on that, but there isn't a person I know who enjoys going to Brussels. And I think there is quite a large element of protectionism that has crept into European practice as well. And there is still the unresolved problem of the Eurozone. I have a house in Greece. I have seen the austerity problems that have been put onto Greece. Now, Greece has, to some extent, some of these things coming to it. They admit that themselves. But the uncouth and undemocratic way in which they've been treated by the EU, and still shot. When the elected Prime Minister wanted to go to a referendum, Papandreou was blocked. When many times when they have been trying to get the support of the EU, it has not been forthcoming when it has been forthcoming from the IMF, who all along have said there has to be debt relief. Now, I think there have been some very nasty aspects and tolerances during this period of austerity, of levels of unemployment from 25 and under, 50, 60% in Spain, in Portugal, even in Italy, not quite as high, but pretty high. I also look at the Italian economy. I really do not think they can live within the Eurozone. So I think there is an impending exit from the Eurozone for Italy regardless. Germans show absolutely no sign whatever of being prepared to fund Italy. And you go and talk to manufacturers in Milan, and they'll tell you we're 25 to 30% uncompetitive in white goods, which has been their major exporting market, in which incidentally Germany are cleaning up on the market. They desperately need a devaluation of the lira, which is what they used to do in the 50s and 60s and the 70s. And I think that the fundamental EU structure, in my view, is dysfunctional. And I speak as somebody who's reluctantly driven to that conclusion. So I understand we come on different sides, but I do think we've got to end this issue and try to think now as Remainers and Leavers has gone, and it's how to get, we have an election, so we're not inheriting the previous government, we have the chance to change the government, we either take it or we don't, that governments in international treaties negotiate on your behalf. I have no hesitation in telling you I'll talk to anybody in the government about the ideas I've given to you and what to do. I don't think that I'm locked in because I'm a social democrat and try my best to help the Labour Party, though it's not very easy these days. And so I don't come to it as a conservative. I've never been one and I never will be one. But when it comes to an international treaty, I expect to respond on what is in the good of the country. And I think we've got to get away from foreign policy for years. When I was Foreign Secretary, I would see Peter Carrington, now Lord Carrington, who was my successor actually, but who was already a very experienced politician and diplomat. I would talk to him as across the party political divide about what was happening in Africa or what was happening anywhere in the world in confidence. And I encourage that. And I don't want to get our party politics into feeling we have to have different international policies. The NATO treaty was brought in by a great Foreign Secretary, Ernie Bevin, and Prime Minister Clement Attlee. They didn't have to go around and see this as Labour's policy. It was the country's policy, and it was supported by the Conservatives in opposition. And you know the old story of Churchill saying, an empty taxi drew up outside of the House of Commons and out stepped Mr. Attlee. Churchill's always denied that, and always said it offends him when he's heard of it. And I read the other day how a Tory MP came to his house in 1947 when he was leader of the opposition and started to be rude about Attlee. And he said from the top of the table, nobody sits around my dinner table and is rude about Mr. Attlee. He's a great patriot. And I would like to see our politics, particularly on international affairs now, go back to that and start to, the referendum has taken place, general election has now taken place. There is a clear mood in the British people now, something like 68% want to get on with it and get the best agreement possible, and that's what I hope we'll now get. Yes?
As a long despairing member, I was wondering what ways you think the Labour Party could get back to winning things.
Well, I left the Labour Party, as some of you may know, in 1981, because we knew then what the manifesto of 1983 would look like. And we tried to persuade Michael Foot to make changes. Shirley Williams, Bill Rogers and myself. I can say this to you, Corbyn has made more changes to appease, if you like, the more centrist right opinion over this manifesto than ever Michael Foot made in the 1983 manifesto. The 1983 manifesto was called by General Kaufman the largest longest suicide note in history. That is not what this manifesto is. I've got criticism of this manifesto, who hasn't? But I'll have even bigger criticisms, no doubt, tomorrow of the Conservative manifesto. But, face up to reality. They had every right to challenge. Well, firstly, the Labour MPs didn't have to give him 15% to be nominated. And this idea, you nominate somebody out of the good-natured part. Politics is a tough business. It's a blood sport. You do not put on the list to be your leader and potential prime minister somebody you don't believe in. And if you don't, and a lot of them didn't, they did it out of a sort of misguided sense of decency. Well, politics isn't that. This is a safeguard mechanism, the 15% of the Labour constitution, given to the parliamentary party at a time when you have electoral colleges and a move now to more trust in the members. And then when you put the trust in the members, they twice defeat the parliamentary party's choice. Now, this is a tension that will have to be resolved inside the Labour Party, but the fact they had their Clause 5 meeting and came up with their agreement and made some modifications, some I don't like. They toughened up the section on deterrent I like. They weakened the section on the National Health Service, which I thoroughly dislike. Now that's the nature of inter-party democracy. You lose some, you win. And it's very difficult. What we proved in the SDP is how difficult it is to break the mold of politics without changing the voting system. So I say to all these parties on the left and progressive side, you're going to have to game the system. You won't get a change by agreement or by appointing a royal commission. You'll only get an agreement if you get a majority. And a majority of political parties from many different walks and different attitudes, Plaid Cymru and SNP, yes, as well, the Scottish Nationalists, they've got a deserved place in Westminster if they're sent there. You've got to assemble a majority that will commit to proportional representation. I don't think Labour can assume that they will be an all-out winner in 2027, when the next election might well take place. But I think they could be the largest party and the influential party. My great-grandfather was called Alderman Llewellyn, and for all my views about the Liberal Party, I have to tell you he was a Liberal. He was chairman of the Ogmore Vale Liberal Association in 1903, but he was also chairman of the Ogmore Vale Liberal and Labour Association that made a deal that allowed at least 39 Labour MPs to be elected to the House in 1906 and provided the opposition to the Tories refusing to abandon the House of Lords and allowing the House of Lords to defy the People's Chamber. So, you know, it's been done before by the Labour Party, and in my view, it will have to be done after the election. Yes?
You spoke briefly in your speech, but how will Brexit influence the Channel Islands and the Isle of Man? This is quite personal for me. We weren't given a say in the referendum, but obviously our relationship will change.
Well, I'm not really expert in it, but I'm told that life will go on very much the same, and that they're not aware of any great problems that will come place. The problem we do face, problem is over Gibraltar, and that's a different issue, and it has to be found in a different way. But I think one of the things you can think about going forward, there are lights. We will retain control of our own waters. That means we have a hand, a very dominant hand, over fisheries. But, you know, I mean, there's hardly a French port that I haven't sailed into in my own sailing boat over the years. And you nestle in alongside a French fishing vessel, and they're offloading, having been fishing off the Cornwall and Devon. And these are old traditional rights. And the same for the Spanish. And now the Danes are tracing the same. So in this negotiation, where we do control our own waters, we will find overfishing that compromises will have to be made. And we'll make friends in some of those compromises and a few enemies in others. And this is what the government has to do. Any negotiation, you give in some ground, you give in another. The problem with this Article 50, and why it is, I use the word immoral. Now, how it could have been brought about, I just do not know. You have a proper negotiation. I slipped into the discussion, the word negotiation. It is not really a negotiation with Article 50. You have discussions, you tell them what they think, they tell you what you think, you can change your position, but then they take it away, trim it, and come back with a proposal, and it's yes or no. And don't underestimate the danger of this cliff edge. And don't underestimate, therefore, why we must be prepared to use the law if necessary and go to the Vienna Conventions to uphold our right to remain for a further 3 years as a subcontracting member of the EEA agreement. Yes?
What were your views at the time on shadowing the Deutsche Mark and the IOM? Because I was at the Bank of England those years, and the whole thing seemed frankly laughable. But I wondered sort of when the tipping point for you came.
Well, Nigel Lawson was Chancellor,
Yeah.
and I've got a lot of time for Nigel Lawson. He was the only person in politics of any stature who warned Margaret Thatcher not to concede the term monetary union in the negotiations over the Single Act. He wrote to her twice and in memorandums and said, do not do this because they will build on it, and before you know where you are, you'll be facing demands for a single currency. And despite her very serious dislike of most of European things, and certainly the single currency, she didn't take any account. But that allows me to say I did at the time disagree with the manner of his shadowing the currency. And we were forced out of the exchange rate mechanism. I hesitate to go back into the dim and distant part, but in 1978, when Jim Callaghan and I were faced by a demand for the ECU and the first big movements towards the European movement, for Giscard d'Estaing and Helmut Schmidt-Mann, who I have the profoundest respect for, a real proper social democrat, we played for time. And what we did was we joined the EMS, we paid in our gold deposits, but we never joined the exchange rate mechanism. And then John Major used much the same technique over the Eurozone. I think the answer is to politicians, when something is fundamentally wrong, and it's difficult to do it in the European Union, have a bottom line. And we should have rejected the euro. I didn't argue for that. I thought John Major did a good negotiation and got our opt-out, but it was not enough. And those who were principled argued against it, they were correct. So shadowing the Deutsche Mark is a technical issue, to be honest. We all of us make mistakes, but I think that Lawson, by and large, improved the economy, I think, a great deal. But I think he was wrong on that ground, and I think Margaret Thatcher, somewhat strangely in the way she licensed her economic advisor to lampoon and to criticise the Chancellor. But I think they had some substance in what they were complaining about. Yes, right about?
Yeah, I was just wondering, there was recently a suggestion by the EU chief negotiator that there could be some kind of scheme for an opt-in citizenship for individuals. I was just wondering, A, what you thought of Verhofstadt as a negotiator, and if you have like any personal insight into what he's like as a person, and B, that seems on the face of it to not be viable. I was just wondering whether you could give us some insight into whether it is viable, and if not, why.
I think common citizenship for the 27 and the UK after we leave is not viable. We have a different view of this. I mean, this common citizenship came in with the Treaty of Maastricht. And one of the things that you see is they build upon that it was no longer, as I said, an aspiration, but it was a concrete demand. And in our opt-out, we're only in the schedules of the Maastricht Treaty. The fundamental that the EU was going to be a union of citizens with a common currency was still maintained. So I think that we have to also face it. We are not going to give up the EU and the ECJ and now take on a court, the ECJ deciding on whether we have fulfilled our obligations to our UK citizenship. I have believed that before we got into the Article 50, we should have actually made a unilateral decision and said we will give EU citizenship to everyone. But I now understand, what I didn't know then, is that they knew that this was going to be bargained over. So when the Prime Minister didn't make this decision, it was because she obviously had sensed that they were coming in with this idea of a strange form of British citizenship which was governed by the ECJ. And I don't think that's viable. But I do feel there are certain obligations, well, certainly me as a Brexiteer, that we have disadvantaged quite a number of people as a result of it, inevitably so. Think of the people who are British, who are in the Commission, and who will now not have the same job opportunities because we'll be out and many of them will find their jobs going. We have an obligation to them, and personally I think we have an obligation to pay their pensions. But whatever we do over the overall pension arrangement, we must certainly face up to the fact that there are costs which are genuinely costs which we've induced by going, and some of those are for British citizens who have played a full and healthy role in the European Union, deserve our thanks, and need to be treated with generosity, and we should fund that. So I have no problem with that at all. I have absolutely no problem at all in anybody who has lived up until whichever moment they decide, Article 50, that they should have full rights as a UK citizen in this country. And I would hope and expect that they would offer the same to our citizens elsewhere. But if we find ourselves locked on this issue, I think this is an area where we will have to look again at unilaterally making a decision. Because I think it's wrong that they should be living unsure about what's going to happen, deciding which school to send their children to and not knowing that they might suddenly have to take them out and go elsewhere. And this is our fault. Our fault, I'm not sure that's the right word, but it's our obligation to try and deal with it. So as soon as it becomes clear that there is no negotiation, if they hold to this demand, then I think we should act unilaterally. But I think given the differences, it makes sense to go through a bilateral negotiating process. But here am I using the word negotiation again, explaining to them why this is not acceptable. It shouldn't require a genius to explain that the ECJ cannot expect to have. But they're creeping and always want it. Anyway, it's not just the Europeans, they're acting like the Americans who always want extraterritorial legislation and have always been trying to have this swing. These are sensitive issues. I'm married to an American, and for a while she was difficult to be involved in politics even, for fear of calling in question her nationality. And that was before you could have dual nationality. Now you have dual nationality. But even if you're a dual citizen and you pay your taxes in the United States, you're under their rules. So I think we have to understand what citizenship is about. It has a clearer meaning, and I think we extended its meaning at the Treaty of Maastricht, and it's somewhat of a pretense of citizenship. And when we argue about these criticisms of the EU, that we see in France a massive group of people totally unsatisfied. I mean, Macron won eventually on the second vote, but I mean, look at, this is great European democracy, split arguably a great deal more than we are about the European Union and its destiny. And it wasn't just Marine Le Pen. It was a significant figure from the Communist Party and from the left, and also from elements of the right. And this division of opinion in Europe is mirrored in Italy, it's mirrored in many, many countries. So when we say we're not leaving a huge success story. This isn't the Europe that I idealistically believed would triumph after the Euro referendum. I was very optimistic. I was hugely in favour, and we in Britain, we held the presidency of the Council in getting in. France wanted Greece first, and we said okay, but we tied Giscard down that he wouldn't veto the Greeks coming in and the Spanish, who were competitive in Mediterranean products with France, and they weren't at all keen. But they wanted, he wanted Greece, but he was unsure about Spain and Portugal. And we supported all three. So there has been a lot of idealism, and there's still a lot of idealism in Europe. And it does trouble me that younger people, by and large, have been less keen on Brexit and prefer to stay. And I understand so. I understand it in my own family, with my grandchildren. So let's work on this and get a solution which suits us all. And I know sometimes people think you can never get a solution in which all are winners. It's quite often done, and actually quite often done in the European Union. The problem is each country then goes off and claims victory. Compromise is part of the European ethos and the EU machinery, and we've got to work within that machinery, and that's why work on precedent, take existing structures, go with the grain. It's against the grain to pay exit fee, a penalty for divorce. That's ridiculous. But to smooth the way and to recognise if we stayed in the EEA for 3 years as part of an implementation period, we would be gaining some EU, and therefore we should pay for it. Seems to me perfectly reasonable. Yes, a lady there. It's a lady first, and then...
what do you think should be done with the UK law which implements EU law? especially Human Rights Act. Should this body of law be expelled from UK law, or should it remain?
Try again and get which is there are two Human Rights Acts, aren't there? There's the Strasbourg law, which Britain signed up to in 1947, and then there are the EU human rights records, which we've always had some problems with.
Yes, but there is an act which have implemented the EU Human Rights Act into UK law.
That would go. We would take it into UK law,
Okay.
and the government seems to be being played fair with us on this. They've said that using these procedures to take all of these laws, they won't change in substance. Then it's a secondary thing whether they change the legal system. Now, whether they will apply that over the next 5 years if the Conservatives win, notice I don't prejudge these questions because I don't have a vote. Criminals, mentally ill, and peers are not allowed to vote. But I think the honest answer is that the EU will more and more heighten their own human rights legislation. And where it's in conflict with Strasbourg, they may also find people saying, well, do we need Strasbourg? We will increase our attention to Strasbourg. There are people who want to change that and get us out of that. But I personally would fight to stay in that. There are problems with some of its legislation. But human rights is an uncomfortable business. I wrote a book when I was Foreign Secretary on human rights. And one of the sentences is, if you prize a great deal in consistency, don't advocate human rights. If you advocate human rights, you are charting a course of inconsistency and embarrassment when your inconsistencies are pointed out to you. But it's still worth championing human rights, in my view. Right, next.
Unfortunately. Yeah, that's all the questions we have time for already.
You're the boss. Thanks a lot.